Stewart, thank you so much for joining FF News' coverage of TCF 23. How are you doing?
Really good. Buzzing from the atmosphere at the event, so looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely brilliant. Now, Stewart, I think it's fair to say that public cloud adoption is expected to continue to grow within banking. Do you have some numbers as to that you can show some of its adoption metrics within the banking industry?
Yeah, so the numbers vary significantly. So we see anywhere between 70 and 85% now are saying that it's going to be part of their strategy or the way that they're actively looking at the way in which they're going to move towards cloud. So I think it is about how they consume those cloud services, but also looking at consuming it from a SaaS perspective in terms of giving the bank more options in terms of how they run their business and how they deliver against their objectives.
Absolutely brilliant. And it just seems like it's moving in such a great direction. But I'm going to take a step back and understand why we're at this point. Why are banks now choosing software as a service or SaaS core banking platforms to go forward?
Okay, so I think there's a number of reasons. So fundamentally, regulators are more open to it.
Yeah.
There's the reaching a pivot point for a number of banks in terms of their legacy platforms, and so needing to move to a newer platform. But what we're also seeing is some of the more sort of indirect impacts. So there is a reduction in availability of resources. So people, supply chains for things like servers and chips and more traditional on-prem models are just more difficult to manage now.
Yeah.
But there's also the human shortage. There's only so many cybersecurity experts across the globe. There's only so many technology experts. And so by banks recognizing this, they're able to consume this service, which is something they can rely on, they can trust for the security, for the governance, for the always on. And then they can focus on what they do best, which is creating value for their customers through banking services. So they don't need to worry about the technology. They can consume the technology and overlay on that the value creation, which is about delivering those differentiated services, and they can invest much closer to the customer whilst they consume that service from us.
Fascinating. It is such an exciting shift in the way that banking is being conducted for 200 years, and then suddenly within 10 we're seeing it all change. But you've brought up something very important there, and that is the kind of security element that leads on to the trust element. And what are the considerations that financial institutions need to go through when they look to use a software as a service provider? There's an element of risk, there's an element of trust that needs to come together. How can Temenos really showcase that you guys own that level of trust?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I have to say, it's one of the conversation points I've probably been having most often,
right,
particularly over these last couple of days,
yeah,
but of recent weeks and months anyway. But it's about how it's engaged across the wider business. I'd say that's the key to this, is about when you look at trust, it has to be across the business. So making sure that we have the data protection officers involved, the chief security officers involved. And so I think that's supporting this journey and making sure those conversations happen earlier in the conversation.
Yeah.
We're sort of moving away from it being seen very much as a cost and technology play, which is where I think it was 3 to 5 years ago. But it's much more now. So typically during an engagement with a prospect, 60 to 80% of our time is spent on the trust criteria.
Yeah.
So how do we deliver security around your data? How do we give security around the platform? And then how do we help you to achieve the regulatory obligations? Well, all of the governance and the best-in-class certifications from the ISO certifications to SOC 2, EU Cloud Code of Conduct for our clients in Europe. So it is that continuing journey. And the biggest key to it for me is the collaboration. So having those discussions much earlier in the process and getting the right people talking to each other from each side is what ultimately helps to build that trust, is through the becoming more aware of what it is and more familiar of how we deliver the service.
Absolutely excellent, because banks just want to bank. It sounds almost a fastest mile in the fact that it's obvious, but we're getting to the point now where banks also have to be tech providers, but they don't want to be. And by partnering with Temenos, they can reduce their outgoings. They can focus on being the bank that they want to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And where we are seeing one of the shifts is banks coming to be more API orchestrators. So what they're orchestrating is the customer journey. So they're bringing together the third parties that they need, consuming the core technology service from Temenos Banking Cloud, and then they're able to aggregate up the right providers, the right fintechs that they need in order to make that compelling customer proposition. So that's probably one of the big shifts that we're seeing, where they do still have a really important role from a technology perspective, is around that API orchestration.
Tremendous. I mean, what I'm hearing is increased security, less risk, improved customer offerings, and ultimately an easier pathway to innovating in the future. Thank you so much, Stewart.
Thank you.